So I'm wetting the sky right down to the water's edge, not to the top of the mountain, so I won't get any hard, tricky edges. I've loaded the brush and squeezed the paint from the brush hairs onto the watercolour paper, and I am tilting. Look at that, isn't it beautiful? Just let your paint flow. It's a lovely way for painting skies, especially if you are a beginner. Just trust the process. So I'm squeezing out some more paints here, top left and top right. And I'm just going to let them sort of move, you know, sort of up and down, tilting, just seeing what happens. And as you can see there, that paint is just running there, and I'm going to tilt it the other way, just allow it to run. And because you've got another layer here now, it's almost building up layers in the sky. So I've added a bit more of the blue, less of the red here, and it's slightly darker colour, and I'm tilting this colour there, just allowing it to kind of do its thing, let it run down. Here's a close-up here of me applying a bit more of the blue with a pinch of red, and just literally at a 90-degree angle, let it run. And I'm using the brush to apply the paint, puddles of paint, and allowing it to run down. And this is kind of in the middle of the sky. I've left a gap for the clouds above, and I'm tilting it so it comes down to the top of the hills there. So you get a lovely soft edge. And I'm going to allow the painting to dry. What I'm doing now is I'm using some washi tape, and I'm actually taping it on the pencil line for the water's edge. So I'm mixing up some colours here. I've got a bit of Paynes grey with a pinch of the phthalo blue. I'm also using a little bit of manganese blue, but you could use cerulean, and this is wet on dry. I'm painting this at the bottom part of this hill using my size 8 round brush. You can see I've got plenty of paint. I've loaded my brush with the Paynes grey and phthalo blue. I'm painting the top part of the hill, and the paint is kind of running into that manganese blue. So you're getting a sort of another mix there. And I'm just concentrating on the edge of the hill there, wet on dry at the top, but obviously it's running into a wet in wet there. You may notice how clean that wash looks because I'm really loading my brush, and how it pulls away from the sky as well. So it looks 3D. It looks like the sky is behind. I've mixed up a little bit more Paynes grey into that mix. So it's slightly thicker, slightly darker. Using the tip of my brush, I'm just dropping this in, pretty much wet into wet at the top part of the hill, just again to bring that sort of top part away from the sky so it looks more 3D. And I'm going to allow my painting to dry. I am wetting the water area, and I'm loading my brush and painting that dilute wash wet into wet, especially at the bottom part of the water, going up carefully around the boat area. I'm just adding a little bit more of that manganese blue, slightly stronger, and just painting that with a size 8 round mop brush just in the foreground area, taking the excess off my paper towel so my paint isn't as wet, so you can just see sort of very light pale ripples in the water. Using that size 8 brush, I'm painting damp into damp at the top right hand side here. Using the tip of the brush, trying to create sort of horizontal lines, carefully painting around the boat using the tip of the brush. So just sticking to the right hand side. Don't try to go all the way across because this part will dry too quickly. And this is kind of the darker area because it's reflecting the hill. And I'm carefully painting up to the water's edge there, leaving a very thin strip of white paper. Taking the excess off again and just painting damp into damp, a few more ripples. And painting damp into damp, or pretty much damp into wet actually. It's not as damp as the other side because it had dried off very quickly, so I had to re-wet it again, but not to worry. So I'm just lifting off some of that paint as well to create some light areas and applying a little bit more dark, damp into damp there, adding a few more brush strokes at the bottom, and I'm going to allow my painting to dry. What I'm doing now is I'm painting the inside of the boat with some manganese blue. You can use phthalo blue or phthalo turquoise, a lovely bright colour to sort of come away from the more grey blues in the background. I'm using my size 4 round brush, and I'm actually diluting some of the paint here and there as well to create light and medium tone washes. So coming around the edge here with a very dilute brush, adding a little bit more dark using phthalo blue, damp into damp, and a very dilute blue here just under the boat. So I'm mixing up Winsor Red now with a little bit of cadmium yellow, and it's kind of a yellow orange, and I'm painting that wet into wet, pushing it into the pink and painting it on the side. Adding a little bit more yellow, and I'm painting a sort of much more of an orange colour at the bottom of the boat where the boat changes colour. So I'm just using the size 8 mop to paint that just at the bottom there as it goes into the water. And I'm mixing up now Winsor Red, and I'm just sort of painting that wet into wet using my paper towel to make sure it doesn't go into the sea. And I'm just sort of splodging it on really, because the boat's quite oldie-woldy looking. I want to create these sort of effects really of the beautiful colours though, but making it look quite old. I'm using some salt, and I thought I'd sprinkle the salt onto the boat to create some lovely textural effects and make it look sort of oldie-woldy as well. So we'll see how that goes. So I'm going to paint the foreground now. So again, I'm starting off wet into wet, wetting the paper, and I'm going to add a little bit of raw sienna here, wet into wet. You could use yellow ochre. And it's to start with the lighter colours first and then build up. So this is some burnt sienna, wet into wet, but I'm sort of leaving lots of gaps now. So it kind of looks like shingle or debris on the beach there. So using the size 8 round brush. I've added a pinch of red to the burnt sienna, and I'm just stippling it wet into wet, or it could be damp into wet in the gaps. I've added some Paynes grey now and burnt sienna. You could use ultramarine with the burnt sienna. And again, I'm stippling more damp into wet now to create some darks there. And it looks quite interesting, doesn't it? Just having a little play really, letting my brush dance around the paper there to create random sort of effects. Adding a touch more red, adding that lovely sort of really creamy sort of dark red colour on the beach area, damp into damp. And this is real time, so I'm allowing my brush freely to dab, but I don't want to cover the yellow up, so always try and paint through the gaps, allowing other colours to show through. And I'm going to allow the painting to dry naturally to allow the salt to work. I think the salt worked a little bit too well. I'm just brushing them off, but they almost look like barnacles and they've been under the sea. So I thought I'd push it back a little bit. So I'm wetting the little boat there, and I'm just painting a dilute Winsor Red with my size 8 round brush. Adding a slightly creamier Alizarin Crimson and Paynes Grey here at the bottom, and just painting wet into wet with my size 8 brush to create sort of textures and darks on this rowing boat here. I'm just using a clean damp brush just to catch that damp edge and start pulling it down into the reflection so all that colour starts to run down. I've got a little bit of yellow and red on my brush to make an orange here to reflect that orange, but I have kind of lost it a little bit. My red did run down onto the orange, but it's kind of a happy accident because it makes it look more rustic. So adding some orange in the reflection there and a very dilute Winsor Red for the main body of the red reflection. So excuse my hand there. I'm using my size 8 round brush, using the tip of the brush just to, as I get to the edge of the reflection, have sort of squiggly lines so it's open, so it gives the illusion of water and reflections. Don't have a closed line like the boat itself. So just work your way down. I've mixed up the Alizarin and Paynes grey and I'm just painting this dark here at the bottom of the boat on the left in the water, damp into damp for the reflection. So you've got the sort of bottom of the boat sort of disappearing into the water. A few more darks, damp into damp here. A little bit of phthalo blue with the Paynes grey, again damp into damp. And I'm just going to paint a little bit of dark here, using the size 8 brush, damp into damp with the Paynes grey with a pinch of red, as you can see on the right hand side here. A little bit of phthalo blue in there as well, a wriggly line so it gives movement and it gives the illusion of reflections. A little bit of dark here at the bottom of the reflection nearest to us, wet on dry pretty much, using phthalo blue and Paynes grey. Few more dark sort of ripples here, damp into damp with the Paynes grey with a pinch of red. I've turned my painting upside down and I'm painting some of the dark details inside this boat using my size 4 round brush. Keep it really simple, just using these 2 colours for now. And if you need to swap to a smaller brush, do so. I'm trying to steer away from any of the red paint and just sort of paint some of these sort of colours and darks here and there. So just painting a few more details here. I've used Paynes grey and red at the bottom and I've just diluted my brush and I'm just blending. So there's a bit of light at the top here. So just keeping that, a little bit more Paynes grey at the bottom and just adding some darks and details here and there, really keeping everything simple. Just using a little bit of the phthalo blue and Paynes grey here and just sort of painting this dark above water, but also its reflection. As soon as you start painting reflections, get that brush wriggling. I'm just adding a few more sort of stray grasses here and there, just using some of the colours left in my palette, adding a bit more dark inside the boat, really to create depth there as well. Using that Paynes grey to paint a few sort of rippling reflections there of the ropes, etc. And I'm going to allow the painting to dry once more. What I'm doing now is I'm just sort of trying to pull the painting together, especially the boat, because the little boat is the star of the show. So using some Paynes grey and red and just adding darks and details, wet on dry, just here and there, just to sharpen up areas as well. I must say, I love how the salt worked in the foreground. It's created the look of seaweed almost. So sometimes you can be very lucky with salt. So I'm really pleased with that. So just adding a few more darks here and there. It just brings the painting to life. Vary your darks, so don't use the same dark all over. So if you're using Paynes grey, maybe add a blue to it or a brown or a red. So it just keeps it interesting. So I'm just finishing off with a spatter here in the foreground, using my hand to protect the water. But if you're worried about that, do use a paper towel to cover the painting. And I've just had a little splodge here, so I'm wetting it with the water and lifting off with the paper towel. So I'm going to allow my painting to dry. So I've mixed up a big puddle of the phthalo blue and the Winsor Red. And I'm using my size 8 brush and I'm glazing this very thin wash, wet on dry, to finish off my painting. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments section. If you'd like to support the content that I create here on YouTube and get access to my weekly exclusive tutorials, why not think about joining my Patreon membership? Details about the membership can be found in the description below. Just click Patreon. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. Happy painting. Bye for now.